Welcome back. Welcome back to yet another day, another dollar, a dollar that we don't entirely get. So another day, another 10 cents, because a majority of that profit is extracted by the capitalist. Boo. Back another day, another week, another Wednesday to talk about gears turning, politics, philosophy, understanding the material condition as it exists to help us understand how things are the way they are, not just to posit them as something inherently unique in being, as you can see the chat talking about that goddamn AI thing, and to understand how this technology can be serviceable to the community and people at hand. So first, right before this, we had our little study group. I'm trying to experiment things out. I'm thinking about going into a recorded session for those as well, to post those, but we'll see. I have to come up with a little guide and rubric, and it's a commitment to get into a study group. I'm already hosting one for another group that I'm a part with. We'll see what happens, but it's a nice time to have a discussion. Anyways, during that study group, we were talking about survival programs, and this is just to recap what happened in there, just to ease us into this. So survival programs, first and foremost, are for survival, and they are for not being here forever. So the essence of a survival program is to not have it last, not have it be here forever, because surviving is not the point. Living is the point. So see, you have a survival program because people aren't even surviving, let alone living. You have a survival program to get people surviving, to then organize them so that they can seize the time to live. Survival program. The school lunch program that the Black Panthers were having. Ooh, interesting. Were for survival. It wasn't so that, eventually kids won't eat free anymore. Everyone will be eating for free type shit. You hear me what I'm saying? The entire program itself was to posit this idea and this concept. Hey, maybe you can feed kids and people for free anyways, because in the system that the Black Panthers lived in, of course, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and whatnot, right, when they lived, didn't have and did not exist a system that provided free food. They did, through their survival program. And the survival program would to be, of course, expanded to the point in where it was no longer a program, it was a common scheme. It would be then a common scheme to take care of your neighbor. It would be then a common scheme to understand the person you're talking to. It would be a common scheme to help and feed and clothe the people in your neighborhood and your community. It would be the common scheme. No more survival program. Survival programs. Understand them, learn them. I'll re-drop the link. I'll copy. I was right here. Forward edits. Let me copy this. Copy text. That was the PDF we were reading in. So there's that for you in there, and we'll finally get into the topics we're discussing today. From the top down, electoralism, bourgeois politics, the general strike as a whole, but mainly to the points of when we're striking, why we're striking, the general strike US, and then the critique of when people say, strike now, we're ready now, I want to strike now. Get all into that. First off, if you haven't heard in the good old socialist space, you should have heard now, the mayor of New York, new mayor elected, Zohran Mamdani, right? Proud socialist and an individual who advocates more on the left side of politics, right? However you can get left of in America. But this guy, self-proclaimed socialist, and who's when you look at the platform that Mamdani was running on, it was fairly left. It was lowering rent for everyone, rent control. Like, it was harsh on housing and rent. That's kind of what Mamdani wrote on, because of course it's fucking ridiculous. The prices in New York is actually like incredible. The prices over there is absolutely insane. For like a 2-foot square bedroom, you could have like a $3,000 rent. How's that sound? Oh, because I feel like maybe your solution just needs to go a little farther towards the sharing of resources, towards the left. This left, my left. This is my left. Towards the left, right? Maybe your solutions just needed to include a little bit more of just like understanding why things are the way they are, right? Instead of being reactionary about it. Maybe your solutions just required people sharing shit. I don't know. I'm not no politician. I'm not no political scientist. But maybe that's the solution to our problems. I don't know. We'll see. But starting from the top, of course, talking about Zohran Mamdani, is understanding that even though the position itself in bourgeois politics and your electoral politics is not the way in advocation for revolution, it is an apparatus, and this is what we must understand and say throughout our development of revolution. The proletariat, the working class, and people collected must use all apparatus available to them to conduct the revolution. Now, right? Hold on, stay with me. Utilizing these apparatus and these functions, we will do so revolutionary. We will do so in ways that, further the people's movement together. Go question. Type it out. I'll be reading the chat. So, but understanding that when the left treats elections, it's not the solution, right? Having people in office has been proven not to be a solution, but it can be a platform for us to jump off and move everyone farther to the left, right? All of the current candidates that we've seen so far have been putting their positions on the right side of politics, the pro-capitalist, the non-pro worker, human, right, collective, right? That's all the current platforms we've seen on so far. Even the so-called socialist and left parties like the Green, PSL, and the DSA and all that, like all of these so-called socialist parties, class collaborators. Mamdani as an individual of that position will still be very restricted because of just the position that it's in. You still have to, of course, organize and work with the other individual groups, parties, and localities of that area of New York, right? But of course, having that position itself and having the individual in that position pushes people to the left. When you start advocating for maybe lower rent, and then lower rent eventually becomes, why don't you just own the damn thing, right? So Mamdani, super cool. We all love it here on the social level because we love to see these wins for the left, to which then we provide a better platform for people to understand how to become more radical, right? But not the entire solution. We praise, we glaze, and we move forward. That's how we view elections. It's like if a candidate wins their position and is incredibly socialist or is incredibly radical to the left, good positioning, then we go farther. We still continue to the work, right? I'm seeing stuff. Free public grocery stores, yes. Public library or public transit, yes. Not just no freeze. Yes, that's correct. Childcare, no. Getting with a squinch, hitting it on the point. Well, essentially, the current public, how is it possible without violent revolution? How is that? Now, I'm not saying be violent, but I have posited. We have made an analysis. The general strike, I'll say it right here, is systemically violent. Woo! Systemic violence. There is another apparatus to our revolution that does conduct in direct violence and agitation. That's not the general strike US. That's not its place, nor does anyone's place belong to a specific office, right? So when it comes to violence and when it comes to needing to charge my laptop, hold on. I unplugged it for some reason. Haha. Now we're saved. So in order to go about this violent revolution, we do it from two fronts. The apparatus known as the vanguard, the highly developed class conscious detachment of the working class, engages in traditional violence, militancy, and organizing the people's militia and army. The general strike US conducts systemic violence because Let's go back to how we understand systemic violence. Would it not be systemically violent to issue and conduct policies that allow living wages for people? Because in the current system, you must have minimum or living wages to permeate, to exist, to have your unemployment populations, to have your unhoused, to have all of these things that do not grant bare subsistence and minimum subsistence. That's a good qualifier for the capitalist system. It is systemically violent then to say that you want living wages for all. That's systemically violent to capitalism. That is like the most washed violence take that you can make about, non-violence or like violence and stuff. So it is definitely a reaction to, because where does self-defense come from? You need to defend yourself from something that is violent, right? The acts of which you conduct yourself are not violence in the primary. It is self-defense in the primary, of which then give way to violence to defend yourself. The reaction or the action coming towards you is violent, and self-defense in the secondary, because they are receiving reaction from your violence granted by their violence. It's self-defense. It's who does it first and who is prompting that bullshit, right? That violence bullshit. But when we go about working outside of the system, that's basically what we're doing. Basically what we're doing is enacting a systemically violent revolution to which we work outside of the system. Working inside of the current system only helps enable that system more, right? Detaching yourself away from it pulls you out of it. So you may not find yourself entirely working outside of the system, but escaping yourself away from it. So relieving your reliance off of it to no longer go to like all the time grocery stores like Walmart, Safeways, Kroger's, Costco's and whatnot, like pulling yourself away from all that to then going into, you know, locally sustainable options. I like to go to farmers markets. I don't go to food pantries, but I'll go to farm market. Some people are selling food or just giving away food because of their excess. Talk to your neighbors, stuff like that. There are many ways to go about this revolutionary. So back to Mamdani. Well, that's basically it about Mamdani, right? After we sidetracked, it's just understanding that the left treats elections as an apparatus, as a tool, not the main focus and aim to which our revolution rides on, right? We align with it, the policies and politics that which come from our elected socialists, but we do not ride on such a system to enact such a change, right? We just don't be doing that. And that what we don't be doing is glazing our politicians, right? Regardless if they're communist or socialist, because within the system entire, how do you go then about changing that system? Well, in the entire electoral politics system, we want to dismantle it altogether, then create a system anew, right? We're not saying that we need a co-opt bourgeois politics, republic and representative democracy in the same ways we see here. We'll just end up replicating the same bullshit, and we don't want that. Moving on to the next point, the general strike US, general strike, right? That's what we're here. That's what we do. And the 2 points that we describe is when we strike, why are we striking? So when do we strike as the general strike US? Of course, I like saying 3.5%, a relatively small number of the population, which comes to about in America, 12 million people, which is sustainable. And here's the thing though. Here's the thing. So we're not going to engage in great grandeur revolution and we're like, oh my God, wow, this is amazing. A bunch of people come together. What we aim to achieve with the strike and initiate and act on the strike is to make a tangible experiment known that people can take care of one another through the collective power of the people, through the strike, right? So let's say the 12 million people come together in a sustained participation of the strike. That presents itself an example for the rest of the people. You can do this too. You don't need to be reliant on the system. The system takes away from you. The people take care of you. That is what we're going for in the strike. The general strike, US strike, does something like this. Come together, understand our needs, understand how to fulfill those needs, get those needs fulfilled, wash, rinse, repeat. And we just keep doing that, right? Posing that example to the people who may or may not be ignorant to what's going on, but basically getting people to understand that we don't need to be doing this privatization of production bullshit. What do you mean people privatize and hold the means of housing like this? All right. The unit that I'm living in is directly attached to the landlord's main house. That way, right? So right, not this wall right here, but there's a wall in the room past this, and then the wall past that wall's connected to the house, right? In a socialist society, we would be all getting houses, right? As opposed to even the landlords themselves, right? Having to go to such lengths to build more property on their property so that they don't have to pay rent or their mortgage, right? Landlords themselves will find any which ways to squeeze in. So of course, one of our demands is to not have landlords, of which a mutual sustainable community engages in the housing provided by the people for the people. It's not just me doing all the work, essentially, like to pay the rent or like, our family unit to do that for another group. That's not mutual aid. That's charity. That's charity work. Mutual aid in the housing sense would to be, I provide you housing, go help me with the farm out back to do some stuff, and that's all you just get. You have housing, well, you have food and whatnot. It's a give and take. Charity, mutual aid, we might have to do another bit on that. Very quickly and shortly, mutual aid is a give and take on both ends, and where both ends give something and take something from one another. It's a mutual exchange. Charity, on the other hand, charity is an entirely giving and taking from one end to another. One person gives, one person takes, and that's it. There is no other relationship beyond which charity can exist on to make it not such. I give money to like a charity, $100 to a charity, and then what do I receive at the end of the day, at the end of the transaction? Nothing. That's charity. Mutual aid now, it's like this non like working of money first and foremost would then be my goods or my services. It's kind of like a bartering and trading to where we meet each other's needs through our skills and resources and time and whatnot, right? That is mutual aid. So beyond the mutual aid, right? So we strike when all of these people conduct that type of mutual aid system to that capacity, to which then we no longer rely on the corporation and businesses to sustain ourselves. Of course, a big apparatus of that would to be acquire land, and acquiring that land is one of those big hurdles. After that, we the people have the resources and time to make it work. And that will be the first inkling of realizing the strike, is when we get some fucking land. I want some land. Land is basically the only thing stopping us, because people are out there militant and understanding who want to do the strike, have the time and resources, just don't have enough resources, and that resources is land. So when do we strike? When we have the capacity to conduct such a strike, right? So we're not stuck on strike dates. Oh, 2028, we're going to strike here. Wow. If we do have the resources and people, the strike number count up till then, yeah, we will initiate that strike. Most likely not. We'll be way farther than we are now in those 3 years, but we're not going to just be like, guys, 2028 strike is on. We're going with the union. We're doing this right now. And then it doesn't amount to anything. And then the movement loses momentum. And then all of what we worked for is just, but we're not saying we're going to keep postponing it, right? We're still very infant in the stages of development of the strike. So when are we striking? When we have enough people, resources, and whatnot, and we are understanding of how to go about formulating that strike. Mutual aid networks and connections, building community resistance, community self-defense programs, reviving a bunch of survival programs to the Black Panther Party, buying land. I would fucking buy land, buy that land, buy land cash straight. Because once you have, because everything has been privatized. In the private mode of production, everything has been privatized. So of course you have to buy land. But once you buy that land, it's yours. The American people are like, that's your land. The American government is like, that's your land. Just pay us taxes and whatnot. But you have to have the land first. So we're not going to be like seizing and stealing land, right? We're not just going to be like, we're going to take this land and be ours. Like there's the legal ramifications to that. And of course, we're a nonviolent organization. We're a nonviolent decentralized network. We work within our means and understandings of how to go about doing stuff. There is a violent militant apparatus to this revolution that GSUS does not engage itself in. Yeah. Reading about those homesteads, I see me and myself and I've doing some analyzing. We can for homesteads. Yeah, there are ways to go compounds, not family compounds as well, but most of these experiments are internal. The whole point of getting land for the general strike is to make it external, to make it as a hub, not as a communal living place for people to grow food on the land and have them be self-sustainable. That's only in part of it. The whole point of getting land for the general strike US is to make it externally available as a hub, a collective resource for people to come in, come out, to platform the movement. Because when you have land, like acres of land, you can do a lot with it. We don't internalize that. We don't section off the land to which then we grow a community by ourselves. A general strike community. No. The general strike community then comes together to make that land accessible for everyone. Right? That's kind of how we turn like that individualistic understanding of how to attain land and take care of it for ourselves. We revolutionize the land to which then addresses the people's need. So it's not me and then a bunch of other GSUS members going onto that land and then saying, oh, this is a compound for the people, but like for the people, for our community, and then we sustain ourselves and then not try to do any supporting of efforts outward. Are we able to go like that? We can. See, it's all about how you go about doing it. So we're like way far from going about committing a strike and having land to commit such that. So when we do acquire and have that land, we'll have some plans at that point, but it's having the stuff to which then your plans can actually found itself on, because we can theorize about what we want to use the land for, how we're going to go about it logistically and whatnot, right? Until we have the land. It's all theory at that point. Land use will generally guarantee all the breads. Yeah, because you're not, so that's where the risk comes in. Because right now, most people can't strike, and we don't want people to strike right now. There's no infrastructure set up. So when we're asking people to strike, we will be at the point and position to have people strike, because then we'll have a support structure for people to conduct that. We're not being like, strike now. Oh, you lost your job? We'll strike again next time. It'll be fine. That's scary. That's horrifying. I would not want to be a part and follow a movement that advocates for a strike and be like, yeah, picket signs. We're striking. Boo. And then what? Right? It's a scary idea to think. Scary notion to understand, where people like advocate for the strike now, which we will get into just a little bit. So, but why are we striking? And that was kind of what we got into it a little bit. Why are we striking? To free ourselves from the reliance of corporations and whatnot, right? We strike in the General Strike US to strike against the corporation, the oppression that we exist in production, and where our labor is taken away from us and not given us any, dues. The paycheck is a bare subsistence and a bare minimum to our living, so that we can reproduce ourselves in the workplace the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. Right? So we strike. Why? Because this shit sucks. Why wouldn't you want to strike? This shit's bunks. This shit's bonks. We don't want to be doing this. Doing this exploitation of labor. Don't want to be doing all that. That's nonsense. That's just extreme nonsense. Why would I want to work for some bozo that don't work himself? Man, that fucking guy. And then he gets to do it off whatever private jet, mansion, private island, and whatnot. Why does my labor, why does the people's collective labor and power provide for a relative few for them to have opulence while the rest of the population does not? Do it not make sense for everyone else? And I already see the argument from the other side, from the right side. But no, people have the right and the freedom to go about doing what they want to do because this is a free society. Excuse me? Don't piss me off. Where did the things that you got came from? Where did the shirt that you're wearing come from? Where did the phone that you have come from? Where did these XYZ, XY come from? ZY, ABC. Where did all that stuff from the people collective? Here's a contradiction to capitalism. Capitalism uses collective power and social effort to materialize goods and services for privatized companies. Almost for society. There is a barrier in which those products and services must enter society under the conditions of the private enterprise. So capitalism uses social power, labor power, and the collective effort of the people to privatize products to then socialize them again. Capitalism is a big old glory middleman. This is ridiculous. This is like the mode of production we exist in now only enables greedy people to be more greedy. I'm not saying greedy people are inherently, but people who man the system just don't realize what they're doing. Right? Oh, I have a business. Anyone can have a business. I have $1 billion. Anyone can have $1 billion. That type of thinking. Not saying that people are inherently greedy, but people not understanding how forces of production works. Not everyone can have $1 billion, right? I don't even know why people want $1 billion. You can't. So it's about using what you have for what you need. You're not gonna use $1 billion in your lifetime, right? There's just what are you gonna do? Buy 20 mansions across the world and then like sleep in every. You're not gonna sleep in every single one every single night, right? What are you gonna buy? Like incredible amount of yachts and boats. You're not gonna drive, be in every single. You're not even gonna fly private jets. You're not even gonna fly those. You don't even fly them. You hire private pilots to fly those damn jets. Right? Yeah, it incentivizes greedy behavior, right? So it's not, I never say that people are inherently greedy, right? It incentivizes them. So in a socialist society, you incentivize sharing behaviors, collective behaviors, and all of a sudden people are like, this is human nature. People are supposed to be sharing and whatnot and stuff like that. It's the system that makes you that way. We'll say that humans are not naturally giving, but humans are naturally kind. People want to be nice. People don't want to be dickheads. The system makes them dickheads, right? It makes all of us dickheads. But living in a different new social order, in a society that publicizes the means of production, now people have access to do what they want. People have their needs met, and people aren't being wondering like, oh, I need to do something extreme to fulfill myself because I need to eat, because I need to house myself, because I need to do something, right? All that is provided to you by society, by the state, to which then you don't have to worry about any of that nonsense. Worry about having to feed yourself, clothe yourself, house yourself, keep yourself mentally stable. All of that is already provided. Your subsistence and your needs are already provided. And then what? Then you get to do whatever you want. And that's society kind of we're striking for. Because we're striking for this, we're striking against a society that doesn't take care of us, that neglects our needs, that doesn't give us the time of day to understand and listen to what we want. It just takes out the whatever, the crowbar, gun, whip, like takes out its violent apparatus, threatens us to work. And if we don't, we starve and die, are homeless, and end up as a lumpen proletariat or especially oppressed. And then what? This system is not just. There is no just capitalist system, the one that privatizes commodities, privatizes the means of production, and privatizes individual lives, right? An entire culture is based around privatization. We call that competition. Like, where do you find the fun in sport and competing with your friends or other people, right? Wouldn't you want to be in a society where you cooperated with other people and where you no longer have competition, in a society where there has to be a winner and therefore must outcome a loser? Wouldn't you just have a society where that's just not a thing? I don't know, radical take. But that itself is what the strike is about. Just getting away from this system of competition to nurture unbridled cooperation, just insatiation, or this satiable feeling of cooperating, right? Whereas we do it now, competition, doing it for a while, right? The schemes of competition in which we share internally and compete externally, and where we should do the inverse. I always say, and this is a little bit of his philosophical take, is that instead of competing externally and outward, to which we see and experience now, to console the soul and console the individual self internally, we do the opposite. Compete with yourself, to which then cooperation materializes externally and outward. And what does this mean? Make yourself the aim of raising your own bar, because you can always outbeat yourself. You can always outcompete yourself. But when you engage in competition with others, you may not find such set of conditions to which you can negate and break and feel gratification from. It's that it's insatiable, it's the climb, it's always needing to do something, this manufactured urgency that capitalism gives you, and other previous modes of production, of course, to which then just has you within this scheme. I need to do this. I need to do that. If I'm not doing something, I'm useless. I need to do something. This is silly. Manufactured sense of urgency stems from this privatized mode of production's current and then the before. This false sense of urgency is entirely manufactured. People don't need to be doing anything. Like, I just saw my fucking cat outside just right now, walking in. I just fucking chilling under a car, looking around. Give him some snacks, head pats, rubs, all the nice, and that dude's just fucking chilling. Why can't we do the same? We were doing the same at one point, just chilling, grabbed a few berries, saw some few fruits, birds in the sky, sun shining, a lion eating an antelope. Oh man, that sucks. But no other sorts of urgency, no sense of I need to do something, no sense of something needs to be happening. We fulfilled that by natural inquisition. You know how the wheel was made? I'm not going to tell you the exact history of it, but I can pretty much summate that the wheel just came about, just people fucking around, right? Just people are like, oh, we made fire, we made wheels, like we just fucking around finding stuff, and then we just kept doing it, and the technologies carried with us. There was no intention, right, directly, to which we aimed ourselves to develop. We just did it, right? We just did it. But now that we can apprehend that we can do stuff, we currently do it in a privatized, competitive, savage, barbaric way. In this barbarism, and where we're still competing in what some people like to call techno-feudalism, and where we have kings and these absolute divine powers and rights and rulers, and where we're just peasants and we're just we're just subject to the whims of the lord, of the king. We don't have any rights. We just subject to whatever they want to do, type shit. That is the striking away. Now, the critique of the strike now, you'll hear people more often, and this was more so an understand before last year, a couple years ago, and where people talking about striking, why don't we strike now? We need a strike now. The system's so corrupt. The system's entirely bad. We need a strike now. We need to do it now. And we don't have the infrastructure to do it, and then two, we don't have the infrastructure to do it. Right? We don't have the resources to do it, and that's why we organize. Now, we weren't the same sort of organization, movement, people, collective as we were last year. We've grown. We've done more things. I've seen that on Instagram or TikTok. I've seen that posted. Peasants. Peasants revolt. Be peasants. Peasants. Small owners of the means of production, right? In hand with the proletariat. For a little fun fact, I'm going off script again. The hammer and sickle, if I can find it on my neck. I think it's inside out. I'm gonna see it. Oh, right here. I feel it. The hammer and sickle, this thing. The hammer represents the manufacturer workers, the proletariat inside of the factories, and the sickle represented the peasants, forming a coalition with the wage laborers, the peasants of which farmed with their pitchforks and sickles. There's the little piece of history on what the hammer and sickle, where it comes from. So that is the hammer and sickle, and that is where the peasants come from. The peasants are the sickles, the wage laborers are the hammers that do the factory work. Womp womp. Hammer and sickle, and that is where you gather worker support and solidarity, right? So hammer and sickle, the critique of the strike now. In that strike now, right, you must formulate the hammer, formulate the sickle, have them in hand, and then you can strike the system. Strike, right? Strike the system. Now there's two, we'll talk about this a little bit, another sidetrack off to the topic. There are two sides to the strike, and it is going to be taking down capitalism, or the pre-strike, and the during/post-strike. The pre-strike, as you would say, is the traditional strike withholding of labor, right? Redirecting of which builds a system antithetical to the current one, socialist system, a communal system that takes not for granted the people's labor, but appreciates the people's labor. That's the first facet of the strike. Now, the strike in the same word, in the English language, as we like to say, the strike is also a strike. Right? We strike, withhold our labor, and then we strike the system. See how that works? Our strike is twofold. Okay. Our strike is a withholding of labor and a redirection of labor. And that labor then redirected to strike the capitalist system, becoming itself not violent because it's self-defense. We formulate this plan of attack because we have experiencing this oppression. Eventually, the GSUS strike movement will turn into the strike back, because we'll have formulated the conditions of the strike, set up mutual aid networks, time-banking programs, or whatever it may become in the future, but having collective sustainability and community resilience by knowing one another. Like, it'd be cool to know the neighbors next to you, right? To know who lives next to you, who can provide what resources, what sort of skills that they have, what do they pertain to as far as work and, resources and skills. Eventually, from this strike and formulating it, we will strike back. Self-defense. We've been beaten and battered by the system and oppressed, shackled and chained up, to which we are now free from our shackles, right? That's your theoretical development and your structural development of economic production, right? Of people's economy, to which then you strike back. You utilize that economic production to materialize a politic, or you materialize a policy of which advocates for the people's right to exist, and formulate a coalition among the people to take care of one another. We strike back, because that is systemic violence against the system. The system does not want to exist with us. They want to oppress us, right? The most tolerable in existence that we have to them is our existence as oppressed people. And that is the only which ways we can exist, live within the system, is if we, the people, are oppressed by the bourgeois. The bourgeois must have a group to oppress, much similar how the monarchs must have a peasant class, a working class to oppress, of which the slave society, the masters of those slaves, must have those slaves to oppress, right? We're done with this silly game, with this this bullshit, this oppression, this needing to extract one from another and then not giving back to the other. We're past that. We don't need that anymore. And it comes through the proletarian movement, which finds itself in a unique position historically to attain such a liberation, because we're all workers. Once upon a time, not everyone was a worker. You had peasants who owned their land, who was not so much outside of the king's rule, but was not experiencing such conditions. Then you had the handicraftsmen, the merchant, the mercantile, and then the other manufacturers of the peasant and feudal times, to which they owned some means of production, to which the king then just extracted from them, not outright entirely owned. Capitalism in the mode of production posits a very unique situation and circumstance to the working class of our current era. Our current historical epoch gives us the proletariat, of which all are workers. And if you are not a worker, a non-proprietor, you are a proprietor. You are a capital holder, right? That is the class distinction and difference that exists and permeates through the 21st century, 20th, right? To our modern era of the mode of production. So all of us are workers, to which we can then find solidarity in that, place. Before it wasn't possible. Now it is. And of course, through the development of our, strike, we exemplify that. We strike. And a strike is just a withholding of labor of which all proletarians have and leverage against the capitalist system, right? We then redirect our labor away from that system to take care of ourselves, right? That's kind of the gist of the strike. So we strike now in our own ways. That is the critique of the strike now. We don't strike now as a collective, as the people whole. We're not going to call to our 350,000 strikers on the strike card, be like, send an email, quit your job now. We're striking now. Hold on now. Those 350,000 people are not in the same state, in the same city, in the same area, in the same sort of section in the country. We're all spread out still. There's 350,000 people spread out across the US, right? But not concentrated to a particular. So 350,000 people in a single city, that can work, right? In a single city, that can do something. But spread out across the country, you'll have 1,000 people here, 1,000 people here, a dozen people here. There's so in some towns have tens of thousands of people in some area, right? But all decentralized, spread out, because there is no infrastructure and or structure, right, to sustain that strike. Push corner path is going to try and move left, right, and returns. Yes. So you'll know what people do when you have their backs against the wall. When their backs are up against the wall, you'll know what they do. The capitalist is reactionary, will fight back, and will do whatever they. So seizing power from the capitalists, we know how this reactionary force will act. When the capitalist's back is to the wall, they will fight tooth and nail, the skin on their bodies, to keep what they have stolen exploited. That's what they'll do. And that's what we know they'll do. Because it's not just I'm saying that because I don't like them. I'm saying that because we've seen it happen, right? We've seen coups, these socialist coups go about and attaining their powers from their feudal and capitalist conditions. And every single power reactionary, of course, wants to keep their power. Of course, we want to keep power as well. But to who? The people. Right? The people want to keep their power, right, under the dictatorship of the proletariat. We want to keep that. So we set up these defensive measures, a self-defense mechanism, to keep away the destruction of the people's power and to keep away the grabbing of the people's power back into the capitalist hands. We strike now in the ways that we can and however we can to materialize such a strike, right? So in the reactionary strike, we strike, get some concessions, have a good day, and that's it. Maybe come back tomorrow. When you surround an army, leave an outfit free. Do not press desperate. Yes. Leave them an option only of which you know. That's what I pick up from that. So Sun Tzu, The Art of War. I've heard about that. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. They will find themselves their way out. Of course, you know where that way out is. You ought to have and understand the knowledge of your battlefield, of the places of which you agitate, work, organize, revolutionize, because then you'll have total control of the situation, right? If you make the enemy believe that they have a way out and free, don't just give them the false sense of security, give them a false sense of hope, right? To which then you can crush their bourgeois spirits and having their freedom to privately own shit, right? That era will be no more, and we'll be looking forward to that day. Will it entirely happen within our lifetimes? I like to think so. Maybe in my rocking chair, right? We're sitting on a house provided to by the state and the people, in my rocking chair, and thinking about passing the times. Wow. Remember when people used to buy water? Ha, 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 ha. Remember when people used to buy food? Ha, 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 ha. That'll be the time. That is the future and the strike that we're going for, that the strike will materialize into. To no longer have like, will I be able to live in a house by next month because I don't have rent? We will be looking back in the future. People used to pay rent for housing. Ha, 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 ha. right? Because housing will have been provided for everyone. That's the strike that we're going for. And so the reactionary strike does not posit any of these ideas, does not give way to any of these materializations. The reactionary strike keeps us within the system. Any spontaneous action without theoretical development regresses back into the capitalist mode of, or the way of doing things. Like the way of doing anything in the capitalist mode of production regresses if we're not guided by their theoretical development. That's where we introduce like the using of the state. Like for me, the Marxist-Leninist, using the state not as an oppressive tool, but to relocate and reallocate resources from the people to where it's needed. Why do you need a gajillion of one thing over here when you have an excess of it, when a group over here does not have any of that? That is the point and purpose of the state, to organize and to delegate the resources of society and to plan the economy as such as is needed. There will be no more private enterprises. Say goodbye to Walmart. Say goodbye to Target. Say goodbye to Costco. Say goodbye to fucking Pop Mart, Labubu's. Say goodbye to Louis Vuitton and Supreme. Say goodbye to all of that shit. All enterprises from the detention proletariat will be state enterprises, will be worker-owned, people-owned enterprises, right? Isn't that such a great thing? Instead of individuals of their own individual sovereignty, because they are such free right to do so, to make businesses, say goodbye to the CEO, say goodbye to the shareholder team, say hello to the people working in such the publicized mode of production. How would you convince people that they would want that? Because they already want that. People already want to go about producing for themselves, or if not producing for themselves, not be entirely exploited. People get a paycheck now and think it's normal. People will think try to work hard is very normal. People love their Labubus. People fucking loved shit. There was something a while ago that people loved that people don't do anymore. There's many examples that people love and people don't anymore for historical periods. Beanie Babies. I know some people like their Beanie Babies still, but it was like a big old thing. Oh my gosh, people like these things. You're just spitting them out. So the whole general of having people what they want is that actually people get to just have more what they want. It's not privatized, right? It's not privatized to which you have to earn. You're given a paycheck to save up to do the things. So imagine this. So you want to go to a concert. You'll still have concerts in socialism. Promise that won't go away eventually. It won't not be a thing. People still convene and gather for maybe not pop stars, but for like music festivals and whatnot. People will still have like gatherings of like music and stuff like that, concerts. It'll just be free, okay? It'll just be people just be showing up. It'll be a community event. People will tell you about it, and then people with their instruments and whatnot and skills will gather to make that such a thing. Now the ways we do it now, it's given advertisement, it's given stipend, it's given all this money and this funding and budget, to which then you have to sell merch to make up for the cost, and then sell tickets, and then people have to make up money to sell it. It'll just be, perform for free, right? Exactly right there. When your needs are met, you'll feel less inclined to want to exchange. Like, when your needs are met. So me personally, I hate garbage. Like sewers, I hate that. Don't get me wrong. If it needs to be done in society, I will suck it up and do it. People will suck it up and do it when their needs are met. If you're provided a home and a house and whatnot and have all these things, then you're going to be doing stuff, right? People already do stuff in shittier conditions. What makes people think you're not going to do that in better conditions? Oh, this whole thing will take generations. I'm not saying anything's take like half in our lifetimes. Most of the stuff that we're talking about, like socialism, like this building of this worker collective, is all generations to come. We'll see the makings of it now, and we will be the ones making that. But to see it actually function in action as a global society, I don't know. I did see a little comment right here. Side note, the anarchists disagree with the state-owned central planning. That is correct. That is right. That is correct. No leftist infighting. That's a myth. I'll say it right here. Leftist infighting is a myth because as a Marxist-Leninist, I agree with the anarchist. Because I know and understand how the anarchist articulates the use of labor power and the use of the people's collective and the use of structures and how we go about society. I'm not going to go here argue with anarchists. There must be a state-owned central plan for an economy for the people. There are ways to go about it. General Strike US is one of those phenomena that makes that statement contradictory, because you are seeing people now taking care of each other, very small amounts. But as the movement grows decentralized, it will be example of how you may not need a state-owned apparatus to control, to maneuver the people. We can do it ourselves. But as the Marxist Leninists, to elevate ourselves into the international society, some form of state worker-owned apparatus is necessary. That's my ideological line, and I'll debate that whatever or whatnot. But agree with you, the anarchist does not recognize the need for a state-owned or worker-owned. There are examples to make of it, and there are critiques and arguments to make about it. The only important thing that we need to be doing is actually making the work do and stuff. And I'm pretty sure no one's against that. Unless you're an armchair, oh no, we need to just do it this way and do it that way, right? The principled anarchists that I know in person in real life, the people that I know actually get down with the shit and actually, feed people, organize, hang up, talk to conversations, whatnot, people, flyers, posters, whatnot, table, whatnot. We do that. So it is like I can tell when someone is not like a principled anarchist and whatnot. Build the material conditions. Yes. Build them. Change them. So people, wait, what do you mean? No, we can change everything by changing people's minds. Okay. We don't need to be doing all that. We just know that people do themselves. Excuse me. What are you talking about right now? So going about understanding like the anarchists, the socialists, the communists, Marxist, Leninists, the Maoists, the Trotskyists, whatnot. It's like, as long as the work gets done. Like for me, ideological differences just come up with how you understand the movement of the material condition. If you understand how it goes about, doing shit, showing results, making the example. That's right. Political education, practical, that's right. And over time, because dialectics says, here's what some of these so-called Marxist Leninists don't understand, that I get into some arguments with these self-proclaimed MLs, where it's like, first of all, people need to understand dialectics as a philosophy, the 3 laws of dialectics, to which the second law applies to what they said, quantity into quality. Right? The quantitative contributions of such into a qualitative difference observable. So pot of water on a stove. The gradual rise and quantitative difference in temperature then brings out a qualitative difference in the water from a non-boiling state to a boiling state, which changes the water from a liquid state to a gaseous state. Right? That quantitative contribution to temperature makes the water boil. The quantitative contributions to the rise in revolutionary conscience of the people gives way to a qualitative difference in people's lives, right? People's understandings, the common people's understandings of how the world works, quantity to quality, second law of dialectics. The third law of dialectics, to which then applies that second law, the negation of the negation. You negate the non-boiling pot of water to the boiling pot of water. The boiling pot of water negates the non-boiling pot of water. The revolutionary negates the reactionary, to which then reactionary raises their revolutionary conscience to become the revolutionary, because then the individual then understands how revolution comes about, right? And you can regress back into it by consuming reactionary media. These states are transient. They can go in between them, similar how you can go from a boiling pot of water to a non-boiling pot of water. It is the quantitative, non-contributions, the taking away of that heat, that settles the water back from a gaseous state to a liquid state. So understand how we move through these states. And that's just dialectics. That's philosophy. Understanding things in relationships. But that is how you go about change. Change comes through about a quantitative contribution to a qualitative observable change in state. So caterpillars to butterflies, in which the quantitative state exists in the cocoon, right? I'm not a person who studies insects and whatnot, the lifestyle of a butterfly, but in the process of the cocoon makes quantitative adjustments to brings a qualitative change in the being that was once the caterpillar into now the butterfly, right? The person is born young to become old. As to the quantitative contributions, we can summarize through time, will bring out a qualitative change in their existence from what is now to what was once before, right? And usually that marker would be the transitionary period of puberty, right? That awkward stage in where your voice cracks, you grow, you get some pains, you're like awkward, you're like don't know how to feel, all this like weird stuff going on. puberty, right? You were born young. You are born young to become old, not the other way around. There's a definite sequence to things. And this quantitative contribution to your age, to time, brings about a qualitative difference in your being. You grow older. You were older, to which your old becomes the new, to which then the new founds a new old. And it just keeps happening. It just keeps going on. And it is this quantitative contribution to which the effects it allows, for example, time onto the person grows, heat onto water boils, and revolutionary consciousness to the reactionary raises their understanding of the world. Quantity to quality. Banger understanding. Understand your laws of dialectics, right? I have zines for that, and we do have printable zines for that. I did make dialectical materialism zines. I don't have them on here. I have to print more. I should have dialectics though. If I have in my zine drawer. Hello, zine drawer. Do you have any? Oh, I guess not. I just have time bank zines. So no dialectics here. But that is in essence how we go about change, how we go about doing that stuff. We change the material condition, which brings about a quantitative change, to which then that qualitative change exists within the understanding of the individual, right? So when you go about and change the world changes for the individual. See how that works? I'll say it again. When you change the world changes for the individual, which then changes them. You don't go about, so I don't know if I was talking about this earlier. I'll give you a short and quick skinny. I was out doing party work. I was out organizing, got into a conversation. Person wasn't having it, talking about tenants unions lowering rent. They said, we have courts and laws for a reason. I don't want to do a rent strike. We go through system process for a reason. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Right. That is an example of needing to cause material change to change the world for the individual. Right. No amount of conversation, theory, dialectics, understanding is going to get my words, my understandings, feelings, and definitions to that person, to the capacity to which then juts them into work or juts them into revolutionary praxis or, practicing and such and whatnot. So it is, in most cases that people need to see a materialized change in order for them to see it happen, right? People need to see it to believe it. That notion. People need to see the material change to know that it works. And that is where we come in. That is where the 3.5% of the population comes in, to make that a reality, to show people that, hey, when you have enough people in these communities and whatnot, these people doing the stuff that you want to happen, actually happen, all of a sudden it's like, wait, this is possible? Oh my God. That's usually when you'll get people, you're like, oh, wait, we can actually do stuff. And then all of a sudden revolution happens, right? Slowly revolution will happen. We won't be conducting ourselves in electoral politics, but when the revolution does happen over those years, you will be seeing more socialists in office, right? Of course, we'll have to be careful not to regress back into it. That's where grassroots is important. That's where bottom up is important. That's where I actually posit the anarchist to have a correct understanding of where to begin, right? At least so far as to begin the struggle, to address the struggles of the people. Because when you start from the grassroots, that's where the people are. There's no denying it. The people are where the grass grows. That's on the land. That's on where the people exist and reside. Not way up high, the Mile High Club and their boobs, their blimps and balloons, and the private jets that they fly, and the towers that they live in, sky high and whatnot. That's not where the people live. The people live here on the ground. People live within community, one another, on the ground, grass, and where everything grows. So you engage in the community at where they grow and live and understand and exist, to which then you organize and agitate towards building collective sustainability, towards building that understanding of solidarity and having that people's force, not towards not an emergency this time, just some spam calls, but not towards like this collective is designed to build towards collective sustainability, and then therefore I need marks and angles on the blimps, marks and angles, and it's just flying through the Macy's parade with everyone wearing red, throwing up the hammer and sickle, throwing up the A, just everyone just being communist and left people, socialists and anarchists. Be a whole funny thing. The fear, I will say, the fear in the bourgeois eyes I'd like to see. That's one of those goals. See, one of those goals is to see the fears in the eyes of the bourgeois, and is to be deemed a threat by the state. What greater honor a revolutionary can have than to be recognized as a threat by the state? Isn't that like a great honor to have? Like, oh, they think I'm a threat to their capitalist establishment. I am honored. I would drink to that. I would go out at that same day with the protective escort to go get a drink, to that. I hear the announcement. So and so is enemy of the state. Even if I knew someone who got outed as enemy of the state, I would be drinking with them. That's right. That's what would happen. We want to be like, oh my God, you're an evil person. The state doesn't like you. Oh, well, what kind of person are you? Why would you do this? I'll be like, that's goddamn right. That's right. You enemy of the state. I am a friend of an enemy of the state. Therefore, it makes me a proxy enemy of the state. That's right. That's what we do here. Because the state enables all of these genocidal acts. Why would I want to be a part of that genocidal act? For common sense. So it's like, be a threat to the state. Of course. Be a threat. Be a menace. But to who? The state. Be aggravated and hateful. But towards who? The state, the bourgeois, the police, the fascists, the pigs. Don't care for people around you, but for who? The people that oppress you, right? Understand where your hatred is going towards and whatnot. All around the thing that people looking rough, Jack Boo jumps down, sending them down. Not even jail for just tough words, tough shit. There it is. 5 o'clock just looked over. This has been that glorious discussion. This has been that great churning of the thought. Venting about, the qualms of capitalism, the inability to do stuff as the individual, but the great amount of potential and opportunity to grow as a people together, collect, because that's what it's all about. Thank you so much for joining today. All power to the people. That's what we say. That's what we do. Raise the revolutionary conscience of the people. So glad to have all of you here. Thank you so much for joining. We will be back next week. I promise that we will be back next week. If you need to go, get out of here. I'm done in a couple minutes. Love you all. Love everyone on the left. Socialist to anarchist to extreme lefts or whatnot, like communism. I don't care. You anti-capitalist, you my buddy, right? That's all that is. So take care. Love you all. All power to the people. Stay safe. Stays up. Brains up. Gains up. And that's what we do. Take care. Love you all.